This is Designing Security Products, where we talk about the intersection of cybersecurity research and product design. And today I'm talking with Julio Arata, who is the Director of User Experience at HiddenLayer. How's it going, Julio?
Good, good. It's a Friday, so I think we've come to the end of a week. So I'm glad to be having some fun talking to you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Well, we have known each other for, gosh, has it been, what? I guess it's been a year and a half, maybe something like that. I bet it's been longer than that, right? Because it always seems like it hasn't been that long.
I mean, with how fast everything's moving within this industry, it's I think I celebrated my anniversary September. So yeah, it's about a year and a half, coming up on 2 years. But yeah, time flies while we're designing.
Yeah.
But that being said, I feel like I've been with the company for forever, so that's always a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way we met is just we got a chance to do some work with HiddenLayer, and then they brought you on as an in-house full-time UX person, and so we collaborated together for a little while,
Yeah.
and then you've kind of taken the ball and run with it from there. So it's exciting to get to catch up with you and just talk a
Yeah.
little bit. So, but let's start by just tell me a little bit about kind of how you got into UX design to begin with, and then assuming that you didn't just immediately start into the cybersecurity space as well, kind of how you found your way into cybersecurity.
Yeah. So it's a long story. I'm sure many designers, especially from the UX side, come from a myriad of different angles. I know for me, getting into UX became, I think all of us who have this long of experience within the industry started before UX was even a thing. I think when my first job out of college, I was an interactive digital designer making flash games for World Wrestling Entertainment and their microsites. And I think I came into the industry purely from like an entertainment space and advertising. So really was focused on film and TV at the time. Ended up with a double major coming out of college, unadvisable for my kids, giving them the recommendation, don't do that. But, I wanted to stay to the dream of making TV shows and movies, and ultimately digital design is kind of what hooked me, and I just stuck with it. Having worked production on the other side, I can tell you that's some grueling work. Although, doing it for fun is a whole different thing. So I still keep up with that. But yeah, so starting at it at WWE really kind of caught the bug by redesigning their website. We do a ton of individual sites for big events. And that's one thing. It's interesting. You get to work with advertising team and branding and try to figure out some interesting little experience. And I know that was all the rage back in the early 2000s, but the real bug of me becoming kind of that UX centric designer was with the redesign of the site. You got to think about that much more. You got to understand who your user is. You got to think about all of the different nuances of interactions, get good feedback, bad feedback, start, planning around that. And even cutting my teeth as kind of that junior level guy, kind of worked my way up the ladder, and along the way learned code, did some front end development, did some Flash development, which is now a way of the dinosaurs. But I think, through that line, ultimately kind of decided, while entertainment's interesting, I wanted to kind of keep going towards that building of websites. Maybe, applications were just starting down that path, but something deeper than here is a front door to something. It's flashy and that's about it. And as fun as those are, and we kept doing them, I moved into Discovery Networks. So that's like TLC and Discovery itself and all the channels associated to it. I purposely joined their R&D product team. I had the option to either go into the advertising division, do the same thing I had done at WWE, but the sales pitch was to ultimately join this new team that was starting to get into the infancy of user experience design. So everything was driven by ad sales campaigns, but we would be building out new versions of the website, co-branded versions, and rolling that out using some of the newest kind of technology then, which was, HTML5 advertising based. But yeah, it's really kind of starting to grow those relationships and figuring out, what you're going to be in this spot. And ultimately through that, I got a lot of personal connections working in New York at Discovery and got connected into the tech world via GE. They were starting a digital division. And that's, I think, when I first got my UX title. I think that was when it was becoming just a new spot. And I was brought under a very similar division from Discovery, but this was called the High Impact Innovation Design Team, which is GE loved their acronyms, and it just was called HIT from there, it was the great thing about that. And I think that's where like the UX bug came in, was we didn't just operate on here is a website, here's an application. You're thinking of the ecosystem. You're thinking about anyone from, we still had a, washer and dryer division at the time. You could do that. But then at the same time, you're working on a project for wind turbine farms or, airlines, and going on the ground, meeting the end user and starting to understand, not just on a, getting some basic research on user analytics, you're actually getting to meet the people. And, through there, I started getting into the opportunity of leading this, pirate ship of a design team, and starting to look at different disciplines. Because I think at that point, there was still the desire for one person to wear 1,000 different hats. So we started specializing the team, and I built it that way. So we'd have someone that was quite good at research, someone that was good at interaction design, and we would cover kind of our flanks, so to speak, in terms of building out a team that would, package up, get sent off for a new project that we build an application for a division, and work from there. And then I think cybersecurity, that actually worked kind of fortuitously in kind of my direction. While working in the digital division, I got to meet some folks from the McAfee side. I also met, at that time, it was a company called Mandiant. And the fortunate part of that is we were supporting it from the GE side. They were more of like a division that was helping us out in terms of securing our business. And we were kind of co-branded, building it was originally called, I think, the GE Store, if I remember correctly, but it was a tie-in with cybersecurity and internet. It was called the Internet of Industrial Things, and the two things were being supported mutually together. So by meeting some of those folks at the right time, at the right place, GE was starting to, historically, it fell under hard times. And as it fell under those hard times, I had met so many good connections in the cybersecurity industry, and started learning on the job on the GE side. And I was brought under, at that point, Mandiant had turned into FireEye, and started my first day with a team of one at FireEye to build out the UX team at FireEye. So went with the very same operation that I did back at the GE days, build a specialized team, kind of cover your dream team of folks that you want on board. But the way that I went about doing it was, given the size, the company had kind of grown to a very segmented team where engineering was very separated from product, and a lot of the iteration and growth to get kind of the end vision was quite slow. So we kind of built almost like that SWAT team approach. I started hiring UI developers in-house. So we were almost an in-house UX agency that could kind of deliver, here's where we want to be, and work with the engineering team to set the stage, and then we'd build around that. And many good years at FireEye, which became Trellix, merging with McAfee. And let's see, I think I built the team out at the end of my time there to about 15 people. And it was great. I think it was very successful in what we did. And I think ultimately the ambition of the team outgrew the company, and the company is, not to speak any ill will, they're not what they used to be. And I got the opportunity to come to HiddenLayer, and hearing kind of at that point, it was like artificial intelligence was just something that was to play around with. It was interesting. And just at the moment that ChatGPT became a homegrown name, it just kind of fell on my lap. So it was, I had at that point opportunities to go the more traditional cybersecurity route, while I think I spent about 5 years at FireEye and Trellix. It was more of the same. And this is something that is brand new territory. And I'm always hungry to find not just, from like an attention perspective. It's like, okay, well, we have a new problem to solve. Like this is something, ultimately the energy's there. You're doing good work for people by supporting them through cybersecurity. Like you always go home at the end of the day feeling good about what you do. But now there's a new threat vector. There's something that we just we're not educated in it. How do we solve that problem? So that's.
Yeah. Do you think that people who end up in the UX field are people who just want to solve problems? Like they see a problem that's out there and they want to figure out how they can solve it. And then UX ends up being one of the pathways for them to be able to kind of scratch that itch.
Yeah, I'd say so. And it's not just a problem externally for the user. I think quite often it's forgotten that internally UX designer, UX team is also putting the pieces together for the team. So often I think, especially in tech, and even more so in cybersecurity, you have such incredibly intelligent people that are solving problems on the back end, but figuring out a way to articulate it to a customer and try to find that through line between here's an amazing solution to something that is a brand new technology. How do you bring that down to the level of companies that are just getting started with AI? Like, yeah, these terms that make sense internally and the tools work to solve those problems. How do you connect that very rigorous approach to solving something on the engineering side and then translating or distilling it to something that the user understands? Which is not easy. And it's always like that's the puzzle that you try to solve. And then the fun of it is then taking that, getting that feedback, and then the loop comes back again. What did you get wrong? I always love even negative feedback. It's like, bring it on. It's always improving our product. It's getting better every time.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the feedback. What are the methods that you found that have been the most helpful in getting feedback from users that you can kind of put into your design, build, learn loop that you're doing?
Yeah, no, I think, we attack it two different ways. Obviously the customer is one way. We have our common analytics tools, those are great. But also it's just regular touch points with the customers, whether it's prospects and we can just kind of lurk in the background and listen to some POC opportunities. We can be in the background for that. Or we have existing customers and we're directly engaging them. So we're reaching out. There's a new release coming out. We both educate our SEs to start asking those questions for us, because often new customers, it's a delicate dance. You want to set them up early to make sure that they feel like they have the confidence that your product is delivering. So sometimes at an early stage, having a UX team designer in some of your chats is, we'll be there, but we're not as driving. But more mature customers, certainly that's the case. But also the advantage of a company as new as ours is that we bring in so many people that are fresh from the industry. So they're just as educated as the customer, and more so in other cases, because they'll see some of the landmines that other companies have stepped on. And they'll be some of our best user interviews, to be honest. At times, it's especially in a space as new as ours, it's the customer doesn't necessarily know what they want in a lot of scenarios. It's that educational process. So bringing that out from like absolute rock stars in the current industry and spelling it out for us and then working back and forth with them to try to establish that, and also that feedback loop. So everything that we tend to get in front of our customers has that extra rigor applied to it. And, are we getting it right every time? No one in the industry ever does. And it's especially, something as new as our technology that we work with, that's just that regular loop. So it's a ton of internal interviews. It's a ton of analytics drawing upon how people are doing things. And then when the opportunity is present with some of our, more mature customers, then we can connect with them that way.
Yeah. Is the design team the ones that are doing the research work, or do you have people that are more dedicated to doing the research side of things at HiddenLayer?
Yes and no. It's so from different aspects. From like a technological perspective, that's up. You have your threat research. That's kind of our bread and butter. Those are folks that are kind of the bleeding edge of understanding what the threats are out there, and that's really important. And that's a good feed loop for us to understand how can we get ahead of things. UX research, we're a small but mighty team. So in our capacity, I'd say we're probably the second line of defense. We tend to get like a regular feedback from our sales folks, our SEs that are getting customers onboarded. And then we start to, once that door is open up and they're comfortable with us, then we sit down on some sessions with them. So it's a dance. Like you start to establish that relationship, then we come in and start to engage with them.
Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned sales, because one of the things that I tend to see, I don't think this is specific to cybersecurity or not, but oftentimes the UX design and research team is not necessarily thinking of the sales team as an advocate and as someone that they should be regularly communicating with, because the sales team is those are the ones that are also talking with prospects the most often. And so if they're not sharing what they're hearing with the design and research team, and the design and the product team is not sharing what they're learning with the sales team, then you're not working as efficiently as you can. Have you seen that to be true?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And especially, as a new company, it's that dance. I know we're going to be in the position at some point where we start to mature and the as the company grows and success grows, those things separate more. But I know how this company has been put together. It's as easy as a quick chat with folks and setting up the time. My calendar is filled with just constantly talking to people. That is, that's the way that we effectively get our communication out. Lots of notes, sure, for sure, but that time, those relationships, and earning the trust of everyone around you that, hey, we've heard you, we're taking this on. We're going to try new things based on, even if it's an odd customer ask, we'll create a concept around that and play it out and see how that resonates. So I think, given the fact that it's a very non-traditional relationship, but I think it's worked quite well here.
Yeah. That's interesting. So you talked about getting feedback from customers. Is there a time that you can think of where maybe you and the team thought, oh, this is really going to resonate, this is going to work, and then
Yeah.
when you actually tested it with users, you found out, oh, that's we were off the mark? Can you think of a specific time? And I realize you may have to kind of sanitize some
Yeah,
of
I
the.
can dance around it. Yeah, no, it depends because, and this is a really tough nut to crack because it's based on the maturity of the AI industry at this point, right? Because, or I should say AI technology and the maturity of the companies that consume it. Because there's such varying degrees of how a company is going to tackle their security around artificial intelligence. It could be more traditional, like a SecOps team is defending against it. It could be a data science heavy organization, and those teams often don't talk the same way to each other, right? So it's and in that case, we deliver something that's more threat focused. Okay, well, for one customer, that works really well. But for other customers, that's not effective. It's something that's more data centric. So, from like a design perspective, that's some of the concepts we're playing around with. Making it more tailored to the specific use case. Obviously, build a really strong foundation of an intuitive navigation and all the interactions you're building. And some of the things we're doing with Pendo and guides and explaining every section, that's helpful too. But I'd say right now, some of the things that we're starting to play around with is tailor the experience. Do you want to see the specific dashboard? Does this work for you? Customize that. Do you want to reorder certain aspects of your absolutely? That's something we're starting to think about, so we can really nail those two varying, like there's a chasm between those two types. And then also the education aspect, because once you start to meet those needs, then you can actually start driving towards that like desired path. So, and it's, I think like from an inspiration standpoint, I'd be lying to say like Johnny Ives or, the Apple, mentality is something that isn't always in my mind, because I'm an Apple fanboy from back in the day. I used to have an 8500 Mac and sitting big tower and the original Mac box. And I've always been a fan of Apple, but over the years, that's how you grew it. It's like you started to kind of make it so intuitive, but then it's also drawing you into the Apple way of doing things. And it's so subtle. And then you suddenly, everything is connected to Apple and it just makes sense and naturally clicks together. And you're always kind of striving for how do you create that end-to-end experience that's just so intuitive but disparate. Like a lot of these technologies don't make sense together in the Apple ecosystem, but poof, they suddenly do because they're connected in such an elegant way. So are we moving towards an Apple model? No, but like that's always kind of like that thought process. I think that's so helpful. So when I think about those chasms, yes, address the current issue today, make something that's highly usable, but start pushing towards like, okay, we're solving these two problems, but can we start getting them towards a natural path that makes sense for both of the individuals?
Yeah. When you were talking about Ive and the Apple design aesthetic,
Yeah.
one of the things that has always struck me about their approach is that they are absolutely willing to kill. I would say in software it would be features, right? They're willing to kill features that some people are using, but most people aren't, and they don't fit with where the company's wanting to go. And they've
Right.
always been very bold, sometimes very much to the headache and heartache of the users, right?
Yeah.
So are you also inspired by that? And how do you find that balance? What advice would you give to other designers in the UI space and security on how to find that balance?
Well, from a design perspective, never be married to your ideas at all. I mean, it's not like we're on a canvas that's using acrylic paint and starting to work out something like that. This is digital. We can constantly iterate, we can constantly change. And I'm never one to think that we're such a mature product that we can't just try something out, back it away. I think at this point, we want to make sure we're holding on to that customer base. But I'd be lying if I would say that, we have a vision of where we want to take this, and it's in something that is same thought process, but starting to remarkably go towards a new design path, and starting to try a different approach, similar to addressing that real issue of the very separate personas.
Is there a time that you can think of where something went wrong? This could be either at Hidden Layer, or you could talk about something like, here's the thing that went wrong, and kind of how your team was able to solve that.
That's a really good question because I know there's a lot of them. So I know with UX design, it's often the understanding of it's an educational process to many teams as you start out as the UX guy to explain that you're not just a visual designer. You're much more than that. There's many different aspects to UX design. I describe it as they think of you as the car designer making the outside of the car, but really the most important part of your job is the touch points inside the car. How does it operate? How does it feel? Does it make sense to hit the blinker in this location? That's some of the aspects of it. Yeah, I would say current with Hidden Layer, I think we're still at that point that we've been on a great path. I don't see a big divergence from like the direction we're going. I think it's really solid. I think with the time at Trellix, we tried to do this master platform and tried to bolt on a lot of disparate existing legacy products. And to that point, that Apple point where we're just trying to get to that simplicity, we managed to take some very legacy Mandiant products that were customers absolutely did not want us touching. They were happy with that UI as bad as it was because that's what they used. And we went ahead and we created a design system, we refreshed it, and then we brought them all together in kind of a single platform using this micro front end architecture that took these legacy products and threw them together using a design system. And we patted ourselves on the back. We thought it was a great product. Generally, it was well received within the company. And rolled it out, and the rage that came out of just like this was not what they wanted. And I think it was a desire because it was a new company of two legacy companies, FireEye and McAfee, coming together to try to shake things up. I don't think the company was at that maturity to really do that. Although the market was asking for it, they really wanted something fresh and new from this company, but that just wasn't it. And I think the big issue that and it was partly because of the tasking and direction for us to be kind of innovative. I think we jumped over our skis a little too far, and we could have created make a better navigation and then throw some of those products as they stand today, but just hook it under a navigation and call it a day for some of those customers. And I don't think we engaged with them as closely as we should have. So while did it sync what we were trying to do? No, but we did have to backtrack some and have a little embarrassment on our part because we tried a little too hard on that.
That's a fantastic story. So if you could go back to yourself at
Yeah.
that pivotal point where you're saying, hey, let's create this new design system, like what is the advice that you would give Julio at that point and your team?
Yeah, so while I am a big advocate, I love design systems. I'm always going to espouse them anywhere I go because that's a good foundation. I would say when you're dealing with a legacy product, legacy company, or even you have something established, don't be the first one to say because it operates for you as a user in kind of something that doesn't feel like a natural flow. Always validate with your users that this is something that you think it's a miss, but to them this is perfect. And you might get I know for us with those legacy applications that were very old, we did a lot of user research, but we tended to, like, from our perspective, we cherry picked some of the younger folks within that organization that wanted to see change, that they like, okay, I like, this doesn't make sense to me. And I'm a, 30-year-old SecOps person, but yet the 50-year-old SecOps person who's cutting the checks loves this product, and some of their leadership loves it. And out of that desire to move quickly and iterate, from that design system perspective, it doesn't need to apply to everything. Like, use it sparingly. You can still draw that experience together with, base CSS values. You could change out some of the colors slightly, but you don't need to completely refresh things that don't need refreshing yet, and start to kind of slowly migrate people in that direction. If it's the kind of slowly boiling the frog in the water mentality, it's starting to get them there. Like, you're going to get them there, but don't just switch it over instantly. It's not never going to work out well for you.
Yeah, I've got a very first time I ever heard the term to frog boil someone was a friend of mine from the cybersecurity space, and I'd never heard that term before used that way, to frog boil someone.
Yeah.
But the thing that I loved about it was I was like, I've never heard that before, and I instantly understand exactly what you're talking about, right?
Mm.
Just kind of a slow, steady thing. So, but that brings its own challenges, right? Like sometimes
Yeah.
it can be more work for the design team to make these small iterative changes and kind of gradually change things, because you're constantly bumping up into things rather than just saying, okay, what if we just pause all of this, create a new, better way, right?
Right.
Um, I feel like a lot of times that seems very tempting to the UI designers.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what you were saying too, right? Like it seemed like such a good idea at the time.
Yeah. And even, from, again, it's cherry picking audience. Like the younger audience, the demographic tended to like this approach. But it's best way to compare it to something like tangible that's everywhere is like Tesla, for example, right? That is something that, in my opinion, UX design does a phenomenal job with the screen. However, to the description of a UX designer, they're not thinking about the touch points everywhere else. It's too far into an electronic space without those tangible dials. I'm certainly a car guy, and I still like those manual things that still operate, and making a hard push towards something that's technologically amazing, but yet you still have something as engaging as a car. Yeah, it's a tough one to solve. So, there's other companies that are doing a better job at that by kind of slowly moving the people in that direction. And eventually you can do all this, touchless everything. I know for my mom, they had a Tesla for about a year and they got rid of it because it was too complex. They couldn't figure it out. Yeah. But yet, if you're purely grading it on the experience of what you can do digitally within the screen, it's amazing. But, you're forgetting about all the other touch points, and that's not good user experience physically.
I guess one example of that is it's a lot easier for me to reach over without looking and turn the volume up on
Yeah.
on the music, right? More so than it is for me to look over and find a knob that I can push the fader up on a digital screen or something, right? There's
Yeah.
no tactical feedback there. So
Yeah, and I'll say the direct analogy to that with cybersecurity is some folks will love a dashboard. Like they'll love something visually appealing or a map of all the assets, and you'll spend all this time and energy to build this visualization out. I know we did that at Trellix, and it was effective. But you had about 50% of the population of one of our customers that just love spreadsheets, or they love tables. They like living in tables. They want to see as much data as possible on their screen, and they're all about looking at the numbers. And if you're not thinking about that group, you're going to chase them away on the other side.
yeah, they want to rack and stack the data, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It's visual learner versus like it's very different. So you have to satisfy both. Yeah.
So let me ask you this then: if you were going to give advice to someone who is UX or UI
Mm-hmm.
person number one coming into a security company, what would be the advice that what would be the advice that you would give them?
It is the easy advice I would say right out of the gate is you need to first understand everyone that's working around you. That's probably the best touch point that you can get. You can get a good read of the industry by the people that you surround yourself in within that company. Do internal interviews. Start to understand the personality types, because quickly you'll pick up on that. And you have the kid gloves that you're not engaging with the customer yet. And while I can give, and new folks that have come on board on the team, I've given that lesson, but also I've personally made sure that they're engaging and put them in some uncomfortable situations dealing with some folks that they would never work with, but are going to give them real golden nuggets of how this experience that we've created so far, where are the pitfalls in it? And yeah, some of the feedback will be, my baby is ugly. That's okay. Get that first, get those reps in, and that would give a good, like I said, kid glove approach to cybersecurity out of the gate. And then, once you've graduated from that, then you can start understanding the industry. But it's also competitive analysis. You go around and you look at a lot of these, successful cybersecurity companies out there, and you'll notice, a lot of them are very restrained, right? Like there's elegance in the restraint that some of those the software that those companies put out, because it's by nature, they need to satisfy those two different brain types. So you want to make something that's intuitive and beautiful. That's our job. something that is that, aha, you'll understand this out of the gate. But at the same time, you're going to deal with that very technical person. So you have to be able to like have a true drill down of like the most detailed information. So you have to satisfy those two things.
So what I heard you say there is understand the people around you and
Yep.
talk with the people that are on your team, and that'll help you understand your industry. But then also do some research and look at other products that are kind of in your space and look for patterns and kind of ask yourself questions of why are these patterns there.
Yeah, 100%. And I would, someone that's coming fresh, either from a different industry, that would be number one. And we're always open to bringing new, because there's a lot of advantages of someone bringing someone from the outside world and having that influence. I'm a big advocate for that. However, you can go too far, and I'll use that example over and over. It is a small world in cybersecurity. It is something that, as big as we think we are relatively small. And you can make a dashboard a million times over. That's fine, but it's really about the underlying data and understanding how those things are presented. That's the most important thing. That's what we're working on. So being able to navigate those waters is so important. And, again, that competitive analysis and the internal discussions, know your, not just your product, but folks that we don't come fresh and show up without our own biases. And you can bring your past experiences and educate those around you in the company. And, with that, you're going to be that much more ready to engage with customers and start building product.
Gotcha. Great. One last question for you. This has been so interesting and helpful. So let's say that if you're giving advice from your UX perspective, you're giving advice to a new cybersecurity founder. Like, what would you tell them on when to incorporate UX or things that they should know kind of about your industry and kind of what you do?
I would say foundationally, right? Because and you see it in every company, it will be engineering led at the beginning. There's a lot of good that before you even start thinking about designing UI, designing the experience. If you're starting fresh, blank sheet of paper, and you have an idea, start to think about not only where this thing lives, what's the persona that you're going to be delivering for, what is your idea, and how that persona comes throughout your experience. But hopefully you're successful enough to grow from there. And you don't want to be in a position that you don't know the landscape of where you want to grow. So even if you're not blank sheet of paper, you're not doing any design work just yet, a UX team is going to be foundationally important to start setting the information architecture, start building that out. Start thinking about the lanes of where these things live and where those things connect. Even if it's like API is connecting to here and backend is connecting to here, you can start helping some of those conversations, start nailing down the taxonomy and start thinking about, is our language on the same page? Does this actually make sense? That is something that, I will always be, should you hire a team of 20 UX designers out of the gate? No, but hire a couple of good ones and start to build that area for growth in the organization early on.
Yep, that's fantastic advice. Julio, thank you so much for talking to me today. This has been great, and I appreciate you, man.